Doggett coming to you on the greatest station in the nation from the greatest location in the nation. As we do each and week, we shout out everybody listening to us as far north as Kennebunkport, Maine, as far south rather as Key West, Florida, as far east as Long Island, New York, and as far west as Long Beach, California, and all the points in between. For those of you that are listening to us around the world, good morning, and good afternoon, or good evening, whichever greeting best suits the time zone that you are in. You know, there are several things that you can do to stop the spread of respiratory diseases like COVID 19. One, wash your hands with warm soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Now, if you do not know what 20 seconds are, just sing happy birthday to yourself. And when you've completed that song, you have completed 20 seconds. Number two, cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Yes, I know, I hear you out there saying, Jeff, come on, that's common sense. I agree, it is, but how many of you know, like I know, that the least common thing these days is common sense? Number three, stay at home when you are sick and stay away from people who are sick. That church service, that concert, that ball game, that play, that movie, whatever it is, that job, whatever it is that you think cannot go on without you, I've got some sobering news for you. Guess what? It's going to go on without you. Trust me. So please stay at home when you are sick and stay away from people who are sick. Also, wipe down frequently touched objects and items with some type of disinfectant, and also make sure you have in your vehicle some hand sanitizer so that when you go to the gas station and pump gas, you will have something to sanitize your hands with, since you do not know who touched that pump prior to you handling it. And this was brought to you by the American Association of Broadcasters and this station, No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise, powered by Google and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines. If you are in the Cleveland area on the first or third Saturday of each month, so that was today. So if you missed it today, don't feel bad, you have another chance. The first or third Saturday of each month, I've got some outstanding news for you. At 6812 Woodland Avenue, right here in Cleveland, Ohio, between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., they are giving away a free bag of groceries. Now listen, you do not have to show proof of residence. You do not have to show proof of income. You do not have to show anything. The only thing that you do have to show is up, and that you show up and you get the free bag of groceries, no questions asked. But listen, it doesn't stop there either, because not only do you get a free bag of groceries, but you get free clothing for adults and children. That's right, for you and your children. You get free clothing in addition to the free bag of groceries. But the topper of all that is this. If you're there between 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., you get a free hot lunch, a home cooked meal that is yummy to your tummy and costs you nothing at all. And when is this, you say? It is the first and third Saturday of each month. Where? 6812 Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, from the hours of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we want to thank the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, We Care Ministries, and also Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, which houses this event each and every month. For those of you that are new to this program, this is what we do each week. We talk politics, we talk sports, we talk the issues of the day. I throw some topics out on the table. I give my take on said topics, and then we invite you to call in with your take on those topics at 216-939-5087. 216-939-5087. Now, you do not have to agree with me, and in fact, that makes for good back and forth. However, there are some ground rules. The ground rules for this show are this. You are allowed one call per week, and you have a 10-minute limit on that call. Now, if you know anything about talk radio, giving you 10 minutes is way more than any other talk show on any other station is going to give you. So you get one call per week, and you get 10 minutes on that call. Other than that, there are no other rules. So, this is what we have on the docket today. We are going to talk about the Biden administration. That's right, the Biden administration, and is the perception, there's a perception out there about the Biden administration, and we're going to examine whether or not that perception is true. We have some thoughts on that, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the recent statement by NBA Commissioner Adam Silver regarding Memphis Grizzly All-Star player Jah Morant and his latest gun incident that appeared on Instagram last month. So we're going to look at that. We are also going to examine whether or not Mar-a-Lago will be the Mar-a-Lago documents will be the downfall for Republican frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. And we're also going to give our thoughts on possible landing space for NFL free agent wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals, but was released by the Cardinals last week. And now he's a free agent, and there are rumors of teams that he can go to. So we're going to give our thoughts on that. And we'll close the show as we normally do with our hero and our zero of the week. So there you are. There are our topics. That's what we're going to hit today. If there's something that you want to hit that we didn't talk about, that's fine. You can bring that up too. As long as you follow the ground rules, 216-939-5087. You know, there is talk out there about the administration of President Joe Biden. And there's a perception out here that about the administration, and I want to look at it and examine, is this an accurate perception? And you were saying, well, Jeff, what is a perception? Well, we're going to get to that in a minute. There are many Democrats and Democratic voting, that is, leaning independent voters who want anybody but Joe Biden to run. President Biden at this moment has very low approval ratings. His approval ratings are in the low to mid 40s. There has been concern about his second term. If he is elected to serve a second term, will he survive the entire second term? There has been talk by some, especially in the Republican Party, candidates that are running for the Republican nomination to oppose President Biden in November of next year. Primarily Nikki Haley, although others have hinted at it, that Joe Biden won't even live through a second term, and that if you vote for him, you're really voting for Kamala Harris. It's interesting that Nikki Haley should say that, because the last time I checked, Nikki Haley is not God. So I don't know how she knows how long somebody is going to live or not live, for that matter, but she did make that statement nonetheless. And so there is a perception out there among voters, both Republican and Democratic and independents, that Biden's presidency has been a failure, or Biden is unelectable, or Biden, if he does get elected, will not serve all the way through a second term. So therefore, there's the perception out there that he's really not a viable candidate, and that his presidency has been less than successful. So we want to look at that. I want to put some facts out here, and I realize that facts sometimes mess up a good argument. I get that, but this is why we call this the right side, because we deal in truth here, not speculation, and not things that we hope or what have you, but we just simply put the facts out here, give our take on those facts, and then let you decide. So let's look at the administration of Joe Biden. Joe Biden was sworn into office back in January of 2021. And since that time, there have been several things that have been accomplished within his administration. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to put these out here so that you can be informed, and then you can make a decision as to whether or not his presidency up to this point has been successful, or has been a failure, or has been just a stalemate, if you will. So, during the Biden administration, President Biden passed, along with the Congress and the Senate, a $1.2 trillion bipartisan, key word here. Now, in fact, let me say this before we get started. In his inaugural address, President Biden talked about the need to have bipartisanship. He realized how divided the country was at the time of his inauguration. You have to remember that his inauguration came 2 weeks after the insurrection, exactly 2 weeks after the resurrection on January 6th. He was inaugurated on January 20th. So he came in 2 weeks after the attempted coup, the attempted insurrection, the overthrow of the duly elected government. He came in at a time where there were vast amount of people across the country questioning whether he really won the election, questioning whether the 2020 election was fair and that Biden won fair and square. And sadly, to this day, there's still a significant percentage of people out here who still think that he did not win the election, that the election was stolen. That has been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that he is the duly elected president. So I'm not going to deal with that. But in his inaugural address, President Biden talked about and stressed the need for bipartisanship. And that was not really a surprise given the fact that President Biden had been in the Senate for close to 40 years and was used to working across the aisle with his Republican colleagues to get vital legislation passed through the Senate. And so he came in at this time of great division in this country, division that we had not seen in this country since the Civil War. And there were many on both sides, both the left and the right, both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, that said that this country is too fractured, that this Congress is too fractured, that the Senate is too fractured to get anything passed in a bipartisan way. And so if Joe Biden wanted to get legislation passed, then the Democrats were going to have to get a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, which they didn't. When he came in, it was a 50-50 split, which meant that any tie vote could be broken by the vice president, president of the Senate, President Pro Tem, Vice President Kamala Harris, but they did not have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. They didn't have 60 seats. So there, as I said, there were many on both the left and the right, many Democrats and Republicans that said that basically President Biden's plan or dream, if you will, of having a bipartisan type of government to get action and legislation done was just a pipe dream. Well, President Biden, along with the Congress of the United States, passed a $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure act, which went to a long way into repairing bridges and roads, upgrading airports, neighborhoods, roads throughout the country, bridges throughout the country. Some of the rail crashes that we've had, notwithstanding, improved the rail system and the tracks that these trains travel on. And this was done in a bipartisan manner. This $1.2 trillion infrastructure package was passed. This was the Build Back Better Act that was passed not just by the Democrats, but also by some Republican support in the Senate as well. And the irony of it all, ladies and gentlemen, is that there were Republicans, primarily in the Congress, but some in the Senate as well, that raged against this bill, that campaigned against this bill, but then when their constituents in their area that they represented benefited from this, they were the first to take credit for this, okay? So you got that done in a bipartisan manner, all right? Not only that, he also was able to get more than 500 million vaccines into the arms of Americans during the height of the COVID pandemic. 500 million vaccines into the arms of Americans during the height of the COVID pandemic. As you remember, he came in 21, and we were losing large amounts of people on a weekly basis here in the U.S. And by the way, the pandemic is not over yet; it's more into an endemic. But we were able to head off a large amount of those who were dying from the coronavirus because of the development of the vaccine. Now, I will give credit where credit's due, because actually the development of this started during the Trump administration, and that he put a hyper speed demand on it to get it done. So, it did not come in during the Biden administration, but he was able to get the vaccine into the arms of 500 million Americans, which stem the tide, if you will, of the death toll here in the United States due to the coronavirus. Not only that, not only just in America, though, because it was taken all over the world to help stem the tide of the death toll across the world. Again, remember, some of the criticism of the Biden administration is that it's been a failure. The perception out there is that he hasn't accomplished anything. The perception out there is that he's been spinning his wheels basically as a president during his presidency. Not only those things, but he also stopped a 30-year streak of federal inaction, right? A 30-year streak of federal inaction, of gun violence, of passing any type of legislation dealing with gun violence, when again a bipartisan bill was passed in the Congress and the Senate that enhanced background checks and closed the boyfriend loophole at gun shows, and also enhanced mental background checks. Now, this was on a federal level. We know that it hasn't trickled down to all the states. If you're a regular listener to this show, you know that there are states across this country that do not have sensible gun legislation, but at least on a federal level, he was able to do something that had not been done in 30 years. We're talking several presidential administrations here, all right? So he was able to accomplish that, again, in a bipartisan way. Also, he made a $369 million investment in climate change and reestablished the American presence at the Paris Climate Control Conference that had been basically thrown by the wayside by the previous administration. Well, he made a move that was one of the largest in American history towards climate change and climate control by allocating these $300 million in climate change, all right? And so by doing this, it established the fact that America was going to be more assertive once again on the world stage to combat this very pervasive problem that we have not only here in America, but throughout the world, all right? So that was done. Also, his administration provided $10,000 to $20,000 in college debt relief to those who had student loans who made under $125,000 a year. Now, he did that by executive order, and the reason why it hasn't gone forward yet is that it has been held up in the Senate to allocate the money. But he did put the executive order out there to allocate debt relief anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to those who had student loans that made $125,000 or less a year. Now, I don't have to tell you, for those of you that are out here either listening to us right now on various mediums that you can listen to us on, or watching us on YouTube or Facebook or things of that nature, I don't have to tell you how important that is. Uh, Anyone that has been weighed down by student loan debt and has been trying to pay it off for years, and especially those that are in the middle age right now, in their late 30s and early 40s, that are still trying to pay off student loan debt, and the issues that causes with that. I don't even have to tell you what a relief that is to get that debt and that amount forgiven. And that brings more money back into the economy, because if they're not having to worry about paying back these student loan debts, then they're able to stimulate the economy by spending money on goods and products that are here in the economy. So he was able to accomplish that. Not only that, but child poverty in the United States, child poverty was cut in half, I should say, through the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan, through that $1.6 trillion that we talked about just a few moments ago, that went to infrastructure and roads and bridges, also part of that American Rescue Plan also gave parents a child tax break. So that contributed greatly and mightily to cutting child poverty here in the U.S. Now, if you're not aware of it, that the child poverty rate here in the U.S. was sometimes on the level of third world countries, especially in rural areas throughout the south and southwest of this country, but also in urban areas as well. That child poverty was a very large problem that was exacerbated by the pandemic as well, as we saw that take place. And another benefit, if you will, of the American Rescue Plan was, as we saw during the pandemic, when children had to stay at home because schools were closed due to the pandemic, there were some areas, especially rural areas and urban areas, that were underserved because the broadband was not there. So students couldn't go on their computers at home. Some didn't even have computers at home. Didn't have the broadband there to go to school online to get their lessons. So they had to make do however they could. Some had to go in the cars and sit in parking lots. You saw those stories. You saw how students had to go to libraries across the country and what have you, because broadband wasn't available. And so the American Rescue Plan also contributed to and helped that as well as cutting child poverty. All right? So, and again, I'm just pointing out these are things that have occurred within the last 2.5 years or so during the Biden administration, with the perception, that is, that his administration has been a failure, he's been a failure as a president, or he's been stuck in neutral and has really not accomplished anything. And all of these are facts. You can look them up for yourself. You can fact check me if you want. That's fine. I encourage you to do that. You will find out that what I'm telling you is true. Also, he capped prescription drug prices at $2,000 per year for seniors who are on Medicare through the Inflation Reduction Act. All right, so he capped prescription drug prices at $2,000 a year. In other words, they couldn't go over $2,000 for a whole year for seniors who are on Medicare through the Inflation Reduction Act. Right now, as much as I'm in denial about my age and what have you, and how old I am, I tell you, like there's a commercial out now, I forget what it's for, but the commercial, there's a woman on there who says age is nothing but a number and mine is unlisted. Well, that's me too. But if I tell the truth about it all, I am considered, I guess, reluctantly admitting that I'm considered to be a senior. And a senior, a person who has a medical condition, I have glaucoma, which requires me to get eye drops throughout the year. To have this amount capped at $2,000 is a great benefit to me. I can speak personally to that. To see my prescription costs go down basically for the eye drops that I have to take to keep my pressures down regarding my glaucoma, my eye diseases I have. So I can speak personally to that. And so this was again accomplished through the Inflation Reduction Act that came about under President Joe Biden. The president who so-called has not done anything, whose presidency has been a failure, who lacks leadership, if you believe some of the narratives out there. Also, too, in addition to the things that I've just said, he also, under his administration, has acquired several times historically low unemployment rates after the pandemic was over. Historically low uh, unemployment rates. As a matter of fact, a job report was released as recent as yesterday that showed that 300 when it was perceived to be that the economy was slow right now, that the latest jobs report that was released yesterday showed that there were 330,000 jobs added in the last quarter across this country. And in a time where there's a slow time in the economy, supposedly that there's a slow time in hiring and what have you. While the perception may be one thing, but the fact says something else. And there have been historically low unemployment rates under this administration since the end of the pandemic. And again, I'm not coming on here to campaign for President Biden. I'm just coming on here just to give you all the facts as to what is going on in this country when it comes to what has occurred under his administration. So we have that, all right? Also, too, and we talked about the capping of the prescription costs and what have you. Well, he's achieved a historically low unemployment rates, as I just said. Also, which this is again caused the economy to take a boost. But not only these things that I just mentioned, but he also strengthened under the Biden administration he strengthened. Excuse me, I'm just adjusting my glasses here so I can read this. He strengthened the NATO alliance. Now, if you remember, during the Trump administration, there was a pulling away from NATO. As a matter of fact, President Trump said that it was one of his goals to get the U.S. out of NATO. And had he been reelected in 2020, who knows where the U.S. would be right now as far as NATO is concerned. And I'm going to tell you this, that if the U.S. is out of NATO, NATO falls apart. Now, you may say, well, so okay, Jeff, what's the big deal about that? Well, NATO is a buffer, if you will, to Putin in Russia. Without NATO, Putin could just basically march in and reclaim all of Eastern Europe, which is really what he wants to do anyway. But he can't do that now because one of the provisions of NATO is that an attack on one nation is an attack on all of them, which means if he tried to attack Poland, for example, he would be attacking the United States, and he's not going to do that because even as murderous and as villainous and as war criminal and as gangsters and thuggish as Vladimir Putin is, he doesn't want that because he knows what the result of that will be. It will be a no-win situation for anyone in that situation. And now, because of his illegal and insane invasion of Ukraine, he has now spurred neighboring countries on his border like Sweden and Finland to join NATO, which had not been a part of NATO before. So we have gone, and because President Biden has made a commitment to strengthen NATO, it is now, you have these countries, as I said, you have Sweden and Finland joining NATO, but now the U.S. allies in Europe have now been emboldened and comforted now that Biden has been in to know that you have a president and an administration in the Biden administration that doesn't want to pull out of NATO but wants to strengthen it. If you go back just a few years ago, it was not that long ago, the U.S. allies in Western Europe were starting to get to the point where they felt like they couldn't depend on the United States based on the things that Donald Trump was saying at that time about pulling out of NATO, about his embracing of Putin, about him saying that he believed Putin more than he believed U.S. intelligence, and his secret meeting, well, not secret, but his meeting with Putin at the G7 summit in Paris, where Putin and Trump went into a room by themselves without the interpreters being there, and so you don't know what was said during that time. So our allies, United States allies, Western allies in Western Europe, were feeling very nervous, and rightfully so, about the commitment or lack thereof of the U.S. to maintain their strength and presence in NATO, in Europe, as a buffer, if you will, as protection from Putin and Russia. And so this has occurred during the Biden administration as well. Also, he has created more than 6.6 million, and this is more than any other president in U.S. history, 6.6 million jobs during his administration. This is more than any other president in U.S. history. During this administration, you have to remember that this was coming out of COVID, and yet he was, in his administration, he was able to create 6.6 million jobs. The employment rate is higher now than at any other time since the administration of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Also, in addition to these things, he reduced health care premiums under the Affordable Health Care Act. He reduced the premium that people who are covered by the Affordable Health Care Act, aka Obamacare, he reduced the premiums that these people have to pay out of pocket during his time in the White House. He also, now, this is the way it was done, drew some criticism. I can see the criticism in it, but he did end the longest war in American history by pulling U.S. troops out of Afghanistan after being there for 20 years after 9/11. Now, the way it happened wasn't the best of ways, but nonetheless, that was accomplished during his administration. He also signed the PACT, the PACT Act. What the PACT Act is this. The PACT Act is to address service members who were exposed to burn pits and other toxins during their service, especially those who served in the Middle East. The PACT Act benefits veterans who were exposed to burn pits and other toxins. And what's significant about this is not only that this act was signed, but that it was opposed by Republican members of both the Senate and the House. This act that would benefit our veterans who served this country, who were exposed to toxic burning of oil and other toxins while on duty, serving this country in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Kuwait, and other places such as that. This act helps them, and this was opposed initially by Republicans both in the House and the Senate. And this is the supposed party of veterans, supposed party that has veterans' concerns at heart and what have you, but we see by that action at least that that's not necessarily so. And, of course, and let me get to the most recent thing last, because there's 15 things, and there actually is more than that, but I only listed 15 of the various things that have been done during his administration. He also signed a bipartisan act, all right, called the Science Act strengthening American manufacturing and research. It's called the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act strengthens American manufacturing and research. And the state of Ohio, where I'm at, has been a beneficiary of it because a plant has been opened in the Columbus area as a result of this CHIPS Act. And again, this was a bipartisan effort. And if you remember in our beginning when we started talking about this, one of his goals as president was to get bipartisan legislation passed in a country that was fractured to a point like it has never been fractured since the Civil War. All right? And yet, this CHIPS Act was was passed by a bipartisan effort in the Senate, signed by the president, and has created jobs and strengthened American manufacturing and scientific research. Also, he reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act through 2027. The Violence Against Women Act was part of the American crime bill that was signed in 1993 and went into law in 1994. That was a very controversial bill because that's where the three strikes law came in, and there were many groups, especially groups that represented people of color, felt that this whole crime act was unfair, that it unfairly targeted people of color. But two things that came out of that crime bill that were positive and beneficiary. One was the assault weapons ban, which sadly expired in 2004 and has not been renewed. But another piece of legislation that came out of that Crime Bill Act of 1993 that signed into law in 1994 under then President Clinton was the Violence Against Women Act, and that was about to expire, and President Biden reauthorized it and extended it through 2027. And then the last thing that I want to share is, of course, what just happened on Thursday, and that is the signing of the passing, I should say, of the legislation that raised the debt ceiling so that this country would not default on its loan and have economic disaster that would not only affect just here in the United States, but would have a worldwide effect. And there was President Biden, again, this was done bipartisanly. He was able to work this out with Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, along with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, with the approval of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, was able to get this debt ceiling reaching effects across the world to adversely is what I meant to say, adversely affect economies throughout the world. So all of these things, and this is just, I just gave you a sample size. These were 15 different things that have been accomplished throughout the Biden administration in the last 2.5 years. And I didn't even mention the fact that he kept his promise of appointing, if a Supreme Court position came available during his presidency, that he would appoint a woman of color, a black woman, to that. I didn't even mention the fact of how many federal judges, people of color, federal judges that have been appointed during his administration. I didn't even mention those things. So I mentioned all of this, and I put all of this out here to then now ask you the question: has his presidency been a failure? Does this sound like a presidency that's stuck in the mud, that's stuck in neutral, that hasn't accomplished anything, that doesn't have a vision, that doesn't know what direction it's going in? As I said, the job market has never been better. 330,000 jobs, just as recent as yesterday. The job report was released, and 330,000 jobs have been added during this quarter. 6.6 million, highest under any president in U.S. history. The infrastructure bill, building back infrastructure here in this country with roads and bridges and what have you. We saw it right here in the state of Ohio, the bridge between Cincinnati and Columbus, how that was, Cincinnati and, Frankfort, Kentucky, how that bridge, which had been badly in disrepair, has now been repaired due to the Build Back Better, $1.6 trillion Build Back Better Act that was passed by bipartisan. And all these other accomplishments that I have mentioned to you during this time. And again, as I said, I did not mention all of them because I didn't want to bore you with going through everything, but I just wanted to build this case and now ask you to ask yourself, is the perception that I'm seeing out here in news media, no matter where you watch, if you watch those that lean more to the right or those that lean more to the left or those that are in the middle, there's this perception out here that the Biden administration hasn't really accomplished anything, that it's just full of malaise, and doesn't have direction, that the president, his mental capacities have been questioned, his cognitive skills have been questioned about exactly how competent is he mentally. Well, looked pretty good to me. As a matter of fact, he did a Jedi mind trick on the Republican Congress the day he gave the State of the Union address, where he tricked them into saying that they would not cut Medicare and Social Security. Remember that during the State of the Union address? So we see all of this, and yet you would think that his approval ratings would be skyrocketed, that they would be off the chart, but they are among some of the lowest of any president at this point in his term in our history. So you have to ask yourself this question. Why is that? Why, if he's accomplished all of these things that I've noted for you today, that I've laid out for you today, then you have to ask yourself this question. Why are his approval ratings so low? And you know, be honest with you folks, I really can't answer that question. I'm baffled myself. Because I always thought that you wanted to hold elected officials accountable. I always thought that you wanted... Welcome to the Right Side, caller. State your name and where you're calling from.
Maureen, I'm calling from Euclid.
Hello, Maureen.
Yes, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the politics.
Okay, go ahead. What's on your mind?
I wanted him to speak on expanding the Supreme Court, and I voted for Biden for different things, but the voters vote. I know he can't do much because of the balance of the Senate and Congress and things, but the voters, I'm just concerned. The voters act. John Lewis Voters Act. That's like my biggest thing right there.
Well, yeah, I'm concerned about that as well, and I'm glad you brought that up, Maureen. The problem with that is that he, by himself, cannot get that legislation passed. Now, what he could he do an executive order? Yes, but the problem with that, and the weakness with executive orders, we talked about this on past shows, but the strength of the executive order is that you can have it in place now, but the weakness is that once that president is no longer in office, the president who comes in after them can basically revoke that executive order. Whereas if you get it passed in the Senate and it gets signed into law, then it's more powerful this way. And so the issue here is that it has not even got to the floor of the Senate yet to be debated, let alone to be voted on, because of the filibuster. Now, the Democrats now have a control of the Senate, but they do not have a filibuster-proof control of the Senate. They do not have 60 votes. In fact, it's 50 to 49 with Kirsten Sinema, who was once a Democrat, declared herself as an independent. So it's 50 to 49 with one independent. And so that's not enough. So that's the issue here. Which means, since that is the issue, Maureen, what has to happen is that throughout the country, not only, you said you're calling from Euclid, so you're in Ohio. So not only here in Ohio, but throughout the country, we have to continue to vote to get people in there that will do these things like passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, like passing, say, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Which means this, in Ohio, since you're in Euclid, here in Ohio, there, in 2024, Sherrod Brown, who's been in the Senate for quite some time, is up for re-election. And there is a concerted effort right now by the Republican Party to flip his seat so that he will no longer be a senator anymore, and that both of our senators here in the state of Ohio, J.D. Vance right now, and whoever the Republicans are going to run against Sherrod Brown next November, if they can flip that seat, that will give them more control. So what we need here in the state of Ohio, if you will, to at least to give us a fighting chance to get something like John Lewis passed, is that people need to come out and vote, especially in the urban areas like the Cleveland area, like Northeast Ohio, like in the Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton area, the urban areas, to come out in large numbers to vote for somebody like Sherrod Brown to overcome what's going to happen in the more rural areas in the state of Ohio. And that's just one example there. They're already starting to talk about this race. In fact, I saw something today online where Sherrod Brown is appealing to people to donate to his campaign to try to keep him in office.
Now, how long? Oh yeah, I know he's been there a good while. I'm concerned about, because I didn't even really know about that, but because Ohio is so conservative, there's a good chance that that could happen unless we do get out there, you know. And so, and what about is there gerrymandering in Ohio? And my last question was, can Biden extend the Supreme Court? I know it's controversial, but I know these people that are extremely, I don't have a problem with the right, but it's the extreme right that we are, it's the Trump supporters, but there's more people brighter than that. That just, to me, kind of insane and want to, what you call dystopian type of society. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but they just are very scary people. You know, I'm in prayer.
Well, to answer your question, can he, and I think what you're asking is, can he extend the number of Supreme Court justices from 9 to a larger number? No, by himself he can't do that. That takes an act of the Senate to be able to do that. And as it stands right now, there's not enough control in the Senate of people who would vote to extend the number of Supreme Court justices, because there's nothing constitutionally that says it can only be 9. Just has to be a odd number so that there can be no tie votes, if you will. So there's nothing in the Constitution that says it has to be only 9 and 9 only, but it does take an act of the Senate to pass a bill to extend the number of individuals that can serve on the Supreme Court. And then the president can sign that into law if he chooses to, or he can veto it if he will, and then if it goes back to the Senate, they have enough votes to override the veto. So that's what needs to be done. It has to be passed in the Senate, and to be very honest with you, Maureen, right now the number of votes that are needed to do that aren't in the Senate at this moment as we speak.
Okay, well, the other thing was, I don't watch those people things that you see stuff online, they're over there praying for a Biden to die. And I think that's just terrible, you know.
Well, yeah, it is. Well, and we talked about this before. Nikki Haley, who is a declared candidate for president in the Republican Party, has already come out and said that if Joe Biden is reelected, that he will not survive his second term, which is kind of curious to me because, as I said in the beginning of the program, the last time I checked, Nikki Haley is not God. So she does not know how many days Biden, for all she knows, he could outlive her. So, exactly. So, but there is that narrative out there, yes, that Joe Biden, should he be reelected, when he is sworn into office for his second term, he'll be 83 years old, which would make him the oldest president in U.S. history.
Right.
And so there is the narrative out there that, he wouldn't make it through his second term. When, again, nobody knows that. And
I think it's pretty right. I remember his mother. She lived to be 91 or 90 something. So I remember that she used to be, when he was vice president, he would pull her out sometime. I remember that. So I'm saying he does have some longevity genes. So I don't know. They already destroyed Kamala Harris, or they tried to. So they're hoping it happens before re-election, so they can try to push their guy back in there. But he's a criminal, so I don't know how that would happen. So I don't know.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and we'll all see how it goes because, again, that's the narrative by some on the Republican right, that a vote for Joe Biden is really a vote for Kamala Harris, and do you really want Kamala Harris as your president? And they're playing that up. That's a new aspect, if you will, of the old what was called and still to this day called the Southern Strategy, that got started actually back in 1968 when Nixon ran for president, and they're playing on that now to basically to white voters in the South primarily, but other places as well. That do you really want to vote for Joe Biden? Because if you're voting for him, you're really voting for Kamala Harris, and do you want her as president? So that's you described it accurately. That narrative is already out there, and that's sad, but it is out there nonetheless.
Right. Okay. Well, you have a good one, and thank you.
Well, thank you for listening, and thank you for your call. Yeah. So Maureen is right. That narrative is out there, sadly. And here's the thing: as I said, you've seen attacks on the president. Now the other day that he fell when he was speaking at a commencement and he was leaving and he fell. And they tried to play that up as that he's a doddering old man, but he tripped over some sandbags and he made a joke out of it. But if you look at him and you watch it when he speaks, his mental capacities are there. I don't see someone who's doddering, who can't put together their thoughts or has a difficult time of doing that. In fact, I see the opposite. As I said, I mean, all you have to do is look back to the State of the Union address, and you'll see most definitely that that's not the case. So, anyway, I hate this cliche, but it is what it is. But I am not one who thinks that that his presidency rather, has been a failure. I don't buy into that perception out here that his presidency is a failure, he's a failure, he's not been competent as president, when, as I said, he has accomplished more things in the last 2.5 years or so than any other president really since Lyndon Johnson. You can make that argument that as far as legislation is concerned, especially bipartisan legislation, that the Biden administration has accomplished more in these first 2.5 years of his term than any other president since the LBJ administration. You could very well make that argument and have some legitimate facts to back that up. So that doesn't seem like to me, and it doesn't look like to me, as some doddering old man who doesn't remember what day it is and needs people to help him to remember things and put things together. I don't see that. And if people are honest, you really don't see that either. You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We're going to take our break right here. We'll come back in our second hour. Second hour, we're going to look at the Jah Morant situation, the comments of NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has some very sobering comments regarding the Jah Morant situation. We're also going to play a tape for you of a gang member who has some thoughts on Jah Morant as well. So we'll get into that in our second hour. We'll also talk about the free agent NFL wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, where he might land. And we'll also look at the Mar-a-Lago documents. Will those be the final nail, if you will, in the coffin of Donald Trump to bring him down? You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We'll be right back at you.
Has violence happened to you or your family? Violence can affect all parts of your life, sometimes in ways you can't see. Violence can affect the way you eat, sleep, it causes you to lose focus, feel angry, afraid, or even use drugs or drinking as a way to escape. But we're here to tell you that violence doesn't have to keep hurting, and you can change your life starting now with help from the Trauma Recovery Center. We want you to take control of your life because today can be the day. The Trauma Recovery Center offers. Has violence happened to you or your family? And now, um, we've been slipping a little bit. I guess I've been slipping, because we haven't done it in a minute, but I've been getting back into this over the past week, so I just want to spread the love and spread the knowledge. And, spreading the knowledge is spreading the wealth. So today, I want to introduce to some and reintroduce to others Mark E. Dean. Born March 2nd, 1957, he is an American inventor and computer engineer. He developed the ISA bus and he led a design team for making a 1 gigahertz computer processor chip. He holds 3 of 9 PC patents for being the creator of the IBM personal computer released in 1981. In 1995, Dean was named the first ever African American IBM Fellow. Dean was elected as a member of the National Academy of Engineering in 2001 for innovative and pioneering contributions to personal computer development. And in 2000, Mark discussed a handheld device that could be able to display media content like a digital newspaper. A decade later, in 2011, Dean stated that he now uses a tablet computer instead of a PC in his blog. So, Dean is the first African American to become an IBM Fellow, like I said earlier, which is the highest technical excellence at the company. In 1997, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. He was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in 2001. In 1997, he won an award for Black Engineering of the Year President's Award. From August 2018 to July 2019, Dean was an interim dean at the UT's Tickle College of Engineering. As of April 26, 2019, April 25th is now officially Mark Dean Day in Knox County, Tennessee. Super dope. So, his patents, you guys, listen. Um, a cooler video display system having programmable border color, composite video color signal generation from digital color signals, microcomputer system bus control means for peripheral processing devices, refresh generator system for dynamic memory. Listen, these are all his patents, and guess what? He has so many more. So you know what I say all the time, guys? You remember? I know you remember. Google. Google. If you don't want to go to the library, Google is your friend. Know your history is knowing you now. I'm decisive for the right side. Now back to Jeff Doggett.
Thank you, Decisive. And even though she said Google, go to the. I'm telling you, go to the library. You can Google, but go to the library and get the book to read. You need to read. But you can Google, and I'm not going against what Decisive said, but I want you all to start reading too. because what you'll find in Google will give you information, but the reading will give you all the details too, so you'll be really informed. So do both. Go to Google and then get the book and read it. NBA superstar Jah Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies. For those of you who do not follow the NBA, Ja Morant is one of the brightest young stars in the NBA. He's the face of the Memphis Grizzlies. You've seen him on commercials. If you're a fan of the NBA, you've been wowed by his talent, by the things that he can do, his leaping ability, his dunks have been well chronicled. He's, quote, posterized, unquote, several players in the NBA. His athleticism is off the charts. His charisma on the floor is infectious. He's just a fun player to watch, and he's the reason that the Memphis Grizzlies are a relevant team and that they are one of the better teams in the Western Conference and one of the better teams in the NBA. All of that is great on the court. Unfortunately, Ja has had some incidents off the court. One happened in February where it was well chronicled, where after a loss against the Denver Nuggets, who right now are playing for the NBA championship, after a loss in Denver against the Nuggets, late night, actually in the wee hours of the following morning, he was at a strip club in Denver and he was waving a handgun around and it was caught on video. And as a result of this, he was suspended 8 games by Commissioner Adam Silver of the NBA. He met personally with the commissioner. He went to a rehab center dealing with anger management and how to deal with stress. Then once he came back, he released a statement basically saying that this is not who he is and that he is working to get his personal life together and working on his dealing with stress and his anger in more positive ways. And he played for the rest of the season with the Grizzlies. And into the season, of course, they were eliminated in the playoffs by the Lakers in the first round. So the season was over, and he basically faded out of the news until May 14th, which was Mother's Day. There was a video on Instagram released of him in a vehicle, once again brandishing a handgun, waving the handgun in the vehicle that he was in. Now, let me say this before we get started on this. What he did in both incidents, both in Denver and both in the vehicle that he was in Memphis, neither one of those broke the law, right? So I just wanted to get this clear that Ja Morant has not done anything criminal, did not break the law. The weapon was registered. He was allowed to carry, he was allowed to have it, right? So he did not break any law that's on the books. But there's something called conduct that's detrimental to both the team and the league. And so this is basically why he was suspended the first time, because his conduct was deemed, and appropriately so, in my opinion, deemed detrimental to the team, the Memphis Grizzlies, and also the National Basketball Association. And again, he had this meeting with Adam Silver, the commissioner in New York, suspended for 8 games, went to this rehab place, went there for a few days or so, and came back and made all the statements and basically told the lie, kept his nose clean as far as we are concerned. This latest incident, however, while not being illegal, once again violated that code, if you will, of conduct detrimental to the team and the league. Now, the Grizzlies suspended him indefinitely, which really has not much significance to it being as the fact that they're not playing right now. So basically, what are they suspending him from? I guess he can't come to the team facility to work out, or things of that nature. He can work out on his own. So it was more symbolic than anything else, because it really doesn't have any consequences. But NBA Commissioner almost said David Stern. I'm sorry, Adam Silver chose the event, if you will, of the NBA Finals during his press conference leading into the finals, game one the other night between Denver and Miami, which Denver won 104-93 to take a 1-0 lead in the series. Use that occasion to make a statement about Jah Morant. And what Commissioner Silver said in that statement, he said that the league has, quote, has uncovered a fair amount of additional information regarding this second Morant gun offense. I guess it's wrong to call it an offense since it was not something that broke the law. This second Morant gun incident, that's a better way to phrase it. So not only was it just the video that we saw on Instagram, but the league, in their own investigation, has, in the words of the commissioner, uncovered an additional amount of information surrounding this. Now, what they've uncovered, we don't know. Commissioner didn't reveal it on Thursday when he had the press conference, but I have a feeling he is going to reveal it later, because he said that they already know, they being the league, already know what action that they're going to take regarding Jah Morant's future as far as how long, if or how long he's going to be suspended. That they already know and they've already determined it, but they are not announcing it now because they don't want to overshadow the NBA Finals that are going on right now. Also, too, Commissioner Silver said that he met with the Players Association before he determined whatever the punishment is going to be that hasn't been announced. Now that's significant because the Players Association is usually not around when punishment is doled out. But in this case, they are. NBA insider Brian Windhorst on ESPN the other day on First Take. Brian Windhorst is a noted NBA insider. And on First Take the other day, he said, I've never heard of anything like this before. It is very unusual. Because he said also that the union is not there when punishment is doled out. And so what Brian Windhorst was intimating here is that this is going to be a suspension of significant amount. He didn't speculate on what he thought. He did say that he didn't think that it would be for an entire season, but that it was going to be a significant portion of the season, according to, as he said, this being a very unusual occurrence, that the commissioner would meet with the NBA Players Association. And the commissioner already knows what the suspension, what the punishment is going to be. He's going to get a suspension. What, we don't know. I don't think it's going to be for the entire season either, but I do think that it's going to be for a significant portion of the season. It may even be for the whole season. But the reason I don't think that it'll be for the whole season is, again, Jah Morant, though he did something stupid, and Kwame Brown, who has a very off-color, if you will, podcast. There's a rapper out there called NBA Youngboy. And Kwame Brown, in his podcast, said that Jah Morant is NBA Dumb Boy. And I kind of agree with him there. It's very stupid what he did. It was not criminal. And so that's why I don't think, although I won't be surprised if it does happen, I don't think that Commissioner Silver is going to suspend Jah Morant for the entire season. That remains to be seen. However, this is what puzzles me. First of all, why are you video or putting yourself on Instagram with you brandishing a weapon? That's number one. Why would you do that? Why did you do it in the strip club in Denver? And then you and your supposed boy riding around in Memphis, why did you feel, or why did your boy feel like, and you gave him the permission to do so, why did y'all feel like you had to put that on Instagram? For what? Especially after what had just happened like a couple of months prior to that. And Jah, you had to know that it was going to get out. You had to know that there was going to be some ramifications behind it, given your history of allegedly during a pickup basketball game at your house that you and a teenage boy, too hard to hear, let that sink in for a minute. You and a teenage boy allegedly got into an altercation and you ran in your house and got your gun. Allegedly, people that were affiliated with you pointed a laser at the bus that the Indiana Pacers were on. So you did that. You had the incident in Denver, and now this. And for what? Why are you doing this? Jah, you're about to sign a supermax deal. Something to the effect of a $250 million contract. You have a contract with Nike that they're putting on hold right now, probably awaiting to see what's going to happen with you regarding the suspension from the commission. So you have that. Then you have the soft drink. I believe it's with Star. I think that's with Starry or Star, whatever that new soft drink is. You got that out. You got that contract. Why are you doing this stuff? You weren't brought up that way. You didn't grow up gang banging. You didn't grow up as a thug. You grew up in a two-parent household in a middle-class neighborhood. That's what you grew up at. I'm not saying that because you live in the hood, you're a thug. I'm not trying to say that, but that you didn't grow up that way. You grew up in a middle-class, two-parent household. There were no indications of this type of, quote, thug life, unquote, when you were playing at Middle Tennessee State. You didn't have this when you first came into the league. So why are you going around, riding around, flashing your gun, showing your weapon? And again, okay, the first time you did it, but you shouldn't have done it in Denver. You shouldn't have done it there. Okay, you get the suspension. You should have known that you couldn't have a second incident like this, and yet you do it again, and you have your boy put it on Instagram for what? What are you trying to do? And it's been alleged you've been running around flashing gang signs. Do you know how dangerous that is? I'm gonna let you all hear this clip. This is a clip that I got of an actual Crip talking about Jah Morant from the viewpoint of a person who is in that life, a viewpoint of a person who is a member of the Crips, a viewpoint from a person who lives this life on a daily. Now, I'm warning you that some of the language in this is graphic, but I decided not to have it edited out because I want you all to hear the rawness of this and the realness of it from this standpoint. Maria, is that ready? Are we ready to play that?
Yes, sir. Just a second.
So this is a person who is an actual gang member, is an actual Crip, on a podcast interview talking about Jah Morant, talking about these incidents, talking about how he's trying to live this thug life, trying to live this gangster life, riding around with his boys throwing gang signs and what have you, and what the ramifications of all that could be. Do you realize, Jah, do you realize you can lose your life? Anytime you riding around throwing gang signs, anytime you riding around flashing weapons or you know, flashing your weapon and waving it around, what have you, you can lose your life. You're making yourself a target. And why? What is it in you that you feel that you have to validate or that's the way you keeping it real, or you trying to be hard or trying to identify with those on the street? Why? Why are you doing this? Why don't you just go on and ball out as a ball? Why don't you go out and make first team All NBA? Be a perennial All-Star. Lead your team to an NBA championship. Why aren't you concentrating on that? Why are you out here trying to be a thug, trying to be hard? We ready for that?
Yes.
Okay, I want you all to listen to this.
Allegedly throwing up crib multiple times.
I'm a 6'7", run it in. You know what's up. He ain't fucking with the gang like that. You throwing them ends up, that's gonna cost you. That's what I was gonna say anyway. That's gonna cost you anyway. What you wanna do? Pay the clips for the rest of your life? And that's gonna cost you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you ain't never been to the 60. You keep throwing up ends and all that shit when you get throwing up C's and all that. You ain't even from that shit. You ain't even from that shit, no way, shape, or form. Like, when you get put on to Memphis, dead homies. Like, come on, let's be real, cuz. Like, start being real with yourself. You a basketball player, cuz. You want to come step into this field, we can show you a whole lot about this shit. Matter of fact, set up a meeting for me and Jah Morant, since he want to be a crib. So I bet you he don't never show up. And it's on some friendly shit. I don't got no beef with you, Jah. You like the face of, like, the NBA. You like the new face of the NBA, and you with this. You claim you're a part of the culture, man. Be the positive side of the culture, like you been. You don't got no felonies. You didn't grow up fucking shit up and all that. You might have smoked some weed or whatever the case is, but come pull up on me. We gonna hang out this summer on the off season. Since you wanna be with this dead homies, I bet you don't be picking up my phone and all that, because our regular life, our regular everyday life,
Allegedly throwing up crib multiple times.
Okay, so
I'm 6'7", run it in.
so that's just it over again. So you heard this. Now that's from a straight up gangbang. And you heard exactly what he said. That, Jah, you're not really about this life. That you really don't want to be about this life. That if you want to represent the culture, then represent the good part of it. Culture. Go out and be an NBA ball player. Don't be out here trying to be something that you're not, because it's going to cost you your life. And I don't know who needs to pull Jah aside, pull his coat, and tell him that, yo, dog, you don't want to roll like this. And you got too much on the line. You about to blow it all. Because you out here trying to be hard. You out here trying to play like, you a gangster or something. That can get you killed. You don't believe me? Ask Tupac. Thugging can get you killed. This ain't no game. There's no referees out there. You ain't going to the free throw line. If you really trying to be about that life, then you know what? You just need to retire from the NBA and then just go on and be about that life. Straight up. That's what you need to do. I don't want you to do that because there's nothing positive in that life. There's nothing but death and destruction in that life. There's nothing but a downward spiral in that life. There's nothing but the only thing that awaits you in that life is death, destruction, or jail time. Always walking out looking over your shoulder wondering who's gonna run up on you and blast. That's what you want? That's what that life's about. Always looking over your shoulder, always wondering somebody approaching you, what they about to do. John, not only are you an NBA player, man, you doing something that we dream about, but you one of the best, you one of the elite in the league, and you want to do this stuff. And you're about to catch some serious time behind it. I'm not talking about jail time. When I say you about to catch some serious time, you about to catch some serious suspension time on this. So think about this. You hurt yourself because Nike is now talking about putting the contract on hold. And if they do, and if they take the shoe contract away from you, just look at how much money you lost there. You're about to get, so you're hurting yourself there. You're hurting your team because they need you, and you're going to be suspended for a significant part of the season. I think you're going to get half the year. I think you can get a 41-game suspension. Because this year not a first-timer, and then, like I said, there's all those other alleged events. And Adam Silver himself said they've uncovered additional information regarding this incident. So we don't know what that is. They do. You probably know too. So you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the team, you're hurting the league, you're hurting the fans, you're hurting people who like to see you play. And for what? Why are you doing this? Why do you think you have to roll like this? And listen, if your boy is really your boy or your boys are really your boys, they wouldn't be encouraging you doing this stuff either. You need to check who your boys really are. Because anybody who really loves you, anybody who really cares about you, they wouldn't be encouraging you to do this. They wouldn't be filming you to put you on Instagram. John, there's some people, surprise, surprise, there's some people that are going to leech off of you because you Jah Morant. But most importantly, dude, start loving yourself, man. Start loving yourself. And I don't mean it in an arrogant way, but man, start loving yourself, man. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure don't bring the noise. If you have any thoughts on that, 216-939-5087. 216-939-5087. I know somebody out there listening has some thoughts on that, so we welcome your call on that. What do you all think Adam Silver is going to do? I really don't know. I think it's going to be a significant amount of time. I don't believe it's going to be a whole year because he hasn't violated the law, but he's a multi-time offender, and I'm not talking about these two incidents. I'm talking about the other alleged incidents as well. Where, as I said, a laser was pointed at the bus of the Indiana Pacers after a game where they had an altercation with the Memphis Grizzlies during the game. The incident with the teenage boy at his house. And then, as we said, the Denver incident, and now this. If you feel like you got to be strapped when you go out places because of who you are, all right, I'm not walking in your shoes, so I don't know. That kind of bothers me too, because it then makes me wonder, well, where you going when you feel like you got to be strapped. But there are crazy people out here that do want to come and do harm to somebody that's famous. So if you feel like you got to be strapped just for protection and safety, okay, reluctantly, I give an okay, and I get that. But why do you feel like you have to like brandish and display and show yourself off like that? Why do you feel like you got to ride around throwing gang signs and what have you? Throw them in the wrong place to the wrong people. Guess what? They gonna fire at you. And then are you gonna be the next tragedy? Are you gonna be the next one we talking about? Young black man died too soon. Look how great a ball player he was, and he lost his life over some stupid stuff. You want to go out like Tupac? You want to go out like Biggie?
Okay.
Is that what you want? And Jah's dad, listen, I'm not going to tell you how to parent your son. But I will say this. Be a father and stop being a friend. Stop being a hanger-on. Stop being an entourage member. Be his father. Be his father. That's all I'm going to say. Jah, you fortunate because you got a father in your life. I would hazard to hunch a very significant percentage of your teammates and guys playing the league with you, they may or may not have ever had a father figure, their own father in their life. They may have had father figures, but they may not have had their own father in their life like you. My concern about him getting a long, season-long suspension is what will that do to him too, personally. I wonder about him because now with all that free time on his hands, what will he do? But he's going to get a significant amount. I believe it'll be half the season, but we'll see. You listen to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring static, but we sure don't bring the noise. This week, in the news, it was reported that tape was released from former President Donald Trump, where he admitted on tape that he had documents at Mar-a-Lago that were classified, and there were documents that he should not have. This was reported by CNN. It was also reported by other news outlets like CBS News, ABC News, MSNBC, and others. Reported this incident, that this tape. There was a tape that was released that had Donald Trump on tape. Now, that shouldn't surprise anyone because he's been on tape before basically incriminating himself. Remember the call to the Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger after the 2020 election, asking him to, quote, find him 11,100,000 so odd votes. In other words, give him one more vote than Joe Biden in Georgia because he said, quote, after all, everybody knows that I won Georgia. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, but the results didn't show that. But this tape has him on tape admitting that he has this classified information and that he really is not supposed to have this. Now, Donald Trump before has said that these boxes of classified documents, that he declassified them, that he had the power to do so, that he could just think to have them declassified, and they are declassified and they're not. That he was asked, so let me just give you the breakdown of the history of this. So at first, when he left the White House, the National Archives realized that he had not turned in everything. So they asked him to turn in his presidential records documents to the National Archives. warrants, as he's supposed to do. He turned some of them in, but then they realized he had not turned all of them in. So they asked again, and again he did not turn all of them in. So then there was a subpoena issued by the Department of Justice to turn the documents in. And again, he did not turn all of them in. In fact, it was seen on surveillance tape at Mar-a-Lago, Mar-a-Lago employees moving boxes to a basement area to hide them in the basement. And that precipitated, I should say, the FBI, as he called it, raid on Mar-a-Lago to get these boxes of documents that were in his possession that he did not have a right to have possession of because these were top secret documents. And we went over these before. And I'm not going to go over the number of documents that were top secret and those that were secret and classified. You know those. If not, like Marie said earlier, Google it. Now, there's been a lot of talk, especially by Trump supporters and his lawyers, that he has the right to have these. No, he doesn't. All right? And then they point out, well, Joe Biden and Mike Pence had documents too, and so why are they not being prosecuted? Why is there not a special prosecutor looking into their possession of documents? The reason for that, folks, is that when Joe Biden and Mike Pence was discovered that they had classified documents, you know what they did with theirs? They turned them in. They gave free access to investigators to come and look to make sure that all of them were turned in. And when it was found that Joe Biden had documents in other places other than his office in Delaware, there were some in his garage, in his car, in his garage. He did not try to fight that and say that he legally had a legal right to keep them and what have you. He turned them over. All Donald Trump had to do, ladies and gentlemen, is this. When the National Archives first asked him back in January or February of 2021 to turn in the documents, all he had to do was turn them in and it would have been over. He wouldn't be under investigation right now. There would be no tape out there right now of him admitting that he had classified documents that he wasn't supposed to have. That would not be out here now because all he had to do was cooperate and turn them over. But no, he didn't do so because of who he is. Now the question, and see, this is potentially a violation of the Espionage Act. For example, the document that he was talking about that he got caught on tape was talking about this classified document detailing or dealing with a possible invasion of Iran. Now, why are you going to keep that? What do you need that for? There's a lot of speculation out, and I don't really want to get into speculation. But knowing him and knowing him, the kind of person he is, was he holding this perhaps to try to sell to the highest bidder? I don't know. I can't think of a logical explanation as to why you would keep these documents and have these documents in the first place, other than the fact that you're a liar and a crook and a criminal. When you've been asked 3 occasions to turn them in and you don't turn them in, and you're seen on surveillance video, well, not you personally, but seen on surveillance video, workers in Mar-a-Lago hiding these boxes in the basement, you tell me. You tell me. And see, let me just compare and contrast something very similar to this. There is an officer, a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel by the name of Robert Burcham. And Robert Burcham was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison on Thursday You know why he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison? He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison on Thursday for unlawfully possessing and retaining classified documents relating to national defense. He pleaded guilty. He's been sentenced to a 3-year term in federal prison because he was in the possession of classified documents that pertain to national defense. This is a retired lieutenant colonel, folks. And he's getting jail time in a federal prison. Now, I don't know how, if any way, it will affect his pension that he gets for the military for the rest of his life. I don't know. Some of you that are in the military that you may or may not know, give me a call, 216-939-5087, if he's going to lose his pension. I don't know. I do know he's going to lose his freedom for 3 years. I know that. The question is, why is there one set of rules for a retired lieutenant colonel and a whole another set of rules for a former president of the United States? Why is this? Why is Robert Burcham about to serve a 3-year prison sentence for illegally retaining classified documents pertaining to national defense, and yet you have a president, former president, who had 25 top secret classified documents in open display, by the way, at his mansion in Mar-a-Lago. 45 classified, so 25 top secret, 45 secret documents on open display. This is not new news. This is old news. You all saw reports of this when the FBI pulled all of that out of Mar-a-Lago last August. And yet, we have to have a special prosecutor appointed by the Department of Justice because Merrick Garland didn't want to handle it because he doesn't want it to look like it's political. Robert Burcham, 3-year sentence. Donald Trump, we don't know what's going to happen. Donald Trump hasn't even been indicted yet. Although, from the reports that we get, even though he gives his bravado publicly, privately, the reports we're getting is that he's very much concerned about this. He's very much concerned that he's going to be indicted and prosecuted for holding and keeping these documents that he had no right to hold and to keep and lie about. It's one thing to have them. And when he was asked to turn them in. He was asked to turn them in. And he lied about turning them in. He was subpoenaed to turn them in. And he still retained significant portions of them and lied and said that he had turned them all in. And yet he's out free for now. He's the leading contender for the Republican nomination for president in 2024. And you have his supporters who know better. I'm not talking about the voters. I'm not talking about the cult of 45. I'm not talking about the MAGA cult. You have Republican senators and congresspeople who know better, folks. Who know better that if the tables were flipped and say this was Barack Obama, that all this information, that they had all this on, they would be singing a different tune, and so would I. They know better, and yet they're running to his defense, talking about witch hunts, talking about unfair prosecutions, talking about unfair persecutions, and they know better. They know better. Too much is given, much is required. They are playing into this cult of personality. They're playing into cult 45. Sounds like we have a caller on the line. Caller, state your name and where you're calling from. Oh, I thought we had a caller on the line. I thought I heard somebody on the line. Okay, so folks, they know better. Jack Smith, who's been appointed as a special prosecutor in this, has compiled this information. Again, Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump publicly is saying that this is fake news, but the tape is the tape is the tape. And he's heard on the tape admitting that he can't declassify these documents and admitting that he knows that he's not supposed to be in possession of it. He's on the tape. In boxing, they talk about the tail of the tape. This is the tail of the tape. So it's just curious to me. Robert Burcham just got sentenced to 3 years. Let's wait and see and watch and see what happens once Trump is indicted. And I believe that he is going to be indicted. Once Trump is indicted, when will he go to trial? Will his trial play out during the presidential campaign of next year? Because I believe that Jack Smith is close to indicting. Let's see how this all plays out. But just keep in mind, Robert Burcham, retired lieutenant colonel from the Navy, got 3 years. What will Donald Trump get? You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure not bring the noise. DeAndre Hopkins, multi-all-pro wide receiver, started his career with the Houston Texans, who were quarterbacked at that time by some guy named Deshaun Watson, and then fell out of favor with then Texan head coach Bill O'Brien, was traded from the Texans rather, to the Arizona Cardinals. Well, last week the Arizona Cardinals released DeAndre Hopkins, and he's now become a free agent. Of course, there's nothing free about a free agent because you have to pay to retain their services. Sorry, bad joke, you all. But he's been released, and so there are rumors out here now as to the teams that are in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes, if you will. There's been several teams that have been mentioned and what their chances are. I'm going to give you those teams and then give you where I think he's going to go. So the Buffalo Bills were one team that was mentioned, but Buffalo really does not have the money to sign him right now because, folks, what he's going to want, Odell Beckham Jr. signed a one-year contract with the Baltimore Ravens for $15 million. Odell Beckham did not even play last year. Now, DeAndre Hopkins missed part of last season because he was serving suspension due to performance-enhancing to PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs. But if he's looking at the fact that I played last season, I haven't had the injury history that Odell Beckham has had, where I've missed seasons because of injuries. He has missed games because of injuries, but name me somebody in the NFL who hasn't, other than Jim Brown, by the way. So he's going to want at least $15 million for one season. Buffalo would have to do some maneuvering to try to get him under the cap. Now, that would be a great pairing for them to pair him along with Stephon Diggs to give them another weapon. Buffalo has been on the precipice, if you will. They've been a Super Bowl favorite for the last few seasons under Josh Allen. But they haven't given any indication. It seems like they're moving out of the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. So that's one landing place that's been mentioned. The both New York teams, the Jets and the Giants, have declared that they're not in the contention for him as well. Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy said on yesterday that Dallas has no interest in signing DeAndre Hopkins right now either. Now, you all have to take all of this with a grain of salt too, because these teams aren't going to reveal their hand publicly. So anytime teams do say that we're not in it or we're not interested, that may be true, but you have to take all that with a grain of salt because there are a lot of negotiating and jockeying for position that's going on as well. So I'm telling you all these things, but I'm also giving you the warning to take all this with a grain of salt. Yesterday I heard a report, now the Houston Texans, who he began his career with, do have money under the cap to sign him, but you have to ask this question. At this stage in his career, because DeAndre Hopkins has just turned 31, so by the time the Houston Texans become a playoff contender, say optimistically, if everything works out right, say they become playoff contenders in 3 years, he'll be 34 years old. He'll be past the prime of his career. Does he really want to go into a situation where he'll have to wait 3, possibly 4 years to really become a Super Bowl contender? That is, assuming that Houston will put all the parts around C.J. Stroud, assuming that C.J. Stroud will be that franchise quarterback that can lead Houston to a Super Bowl. That's a lot of assumptions for a guy who's not 27, but a guy who's 31. So while Houston has the money, so that would not be an issue, you then have to question if he does go there, or if he's considering to go there, is he more concerned about getting paid or does he want to win? Because he's made, and again, I'm not trying to talk against anybody trying to get their bag, but he's made a lot of money in his career. Enough to make him comfortable for the rest of his life. So now you have to ask the question, am I more interested in getting another bag, or am I more interested in maybe taking a little less money but putting myself in a position where I can play or compete for a Super Bowl? Don't know. I don't know. I'm not inside his head. I don't know. But I can't see him going to the Texans. Maybe he will. He can prove me wrong. The other team that's been mentioned is the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the best, without a shadow of a doubt, the best quarterback in the league, coming off of a Super Bowl. Their pedigree, and given their stable receivers, given the fact that they have Mahomes, their offensive line, what have you, that would be an ideal landing spot for him. Now, the Chiefs would have to do some maneuvering as well with the cap in order to get him in. But if you know the history of the NFL, teams can maneuver the cap in these kind of situations. So if they really want him and he wants to be there, they can work out the cap in a way where they'll be able to sign him there. And then the other team, of course, that's been mentioned are the Cleveland Browns. Given his relationship with Deshaun Watson, given the fact that the Browns just freed up cap money on June 1st, where they got the cap relief from releasing John Johnson's contract.
And can I add in, he's been tweeting out dog faces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Browns are the perceived by some front run. And as I said, the Browns just got cap relief from Jadeveon Clowney and also John Johnson's contracts on June 1st. So if I were to handicap the odds, I would say maybe the Browns have a 4 in 10 chance of signing him. The Chiefs may have a 3 in 10 chance signing him, and the others, you can just fill in the blank behind that. Now, I'll take my fandom out of it, put myself in his shoes. Do I want to go to Cleveland or Kansas City? If I'm him, to be honest with you, I'd go to Kansas City, being as the fact that Kansas City is coming off of a Super Bowl win, that they have Patrick Mahomes. And listen, I know Deshaun Watson can ball out, and I do expect a huge bounce back season this year from Deshaun Watson. But right now, Patrick Mahomes is the GOAT of the league right now. And the Chiefs have the winning experience. They have the winning culture. They're not coming off of a 7-10 season. That was the year prior to that was 8-9. And so if I'm him, I'm going to Kansas City. Now, as a Browns fan, of course, I want him to come here to Cleveland. So it remains to be seen. And we should know something within the next few weeks or so, because I think this decision is going to be made by training camp. So keep your eyes out. Right now, I think he's going to Kansas City, but it wouldn't shock nor surprise me if he did wind up signing here in Cleveland with the Browns. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We come to the end of our program, as we do on each week. We give our hero and our zero of the week. For our hero of the week, I want to thank my colleague on this station, the host of Body Talk, Alan Bridges, who sent me something via text message. And when I read this article about this young man, I said, yes, this young man has definitely got to be the hero of the week this week. And the hero of the week is West Florissant, Missouri middle school student, Xavier Jones. And the reason that he's the hero of the week this week, folks, is that this young man walked 2 hours. He walked for 2 hours. He walked 7 miles to his graduation ceremony from middle school to high school. And they interviewed him, and he said he was determined to get to his graduation because he worked so hard for it. The graduation was held the commencement ceremony was held at historically black HBCU school, historically black colleges and universities. For those of you who don't know what HBU stands for, Harris Stowe State University there in Missouri. And he walked the 7 miles from his home in West Florissant to Harris Stowe State University to be there for his graduation ceremony. And because of his determination, this HBCU school, you know what they did? They awarded him a full presidential scholarship to go to college there when he graduates from high school. Because of the determination he showed, because of the hard work he showed while he was in middle school, and the determination he showed to get to his commencement ceremony, this college awarded him a full presidential scholarship to attend there when he graduates from high school. So, young Mr. Jones, I applaud you. I applaud your effort. I applaud your determination. And you are our hero of the week. Our zero of the week is every Democrat and Republican that voted against raising the debt ceiling. And I don't even have to pontificate on why you are zeros, because you are. Because you let political agendas, for whatever they are, get in the way of what's best for this country. And so both Democrats and Republicans, and there were more Republicans than Democrats that voted against it, you are our zero of the week. You've been listening to the right side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Right now, I see that my time is up. Thank you very much for your time, and until next Saturday at 3 p.m., shalom.
We'd like to thank you for tuning in to The Right Side with your host, Jeff Doggett, here on the station where we don't bring no static, but we sure enough bring the noise on staticradio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media where we absolutely love to hear from you on facebook.com/No Static Radio LLC, on Twitter at No Static _ radio, on Instagram at The Real _ No Static Radio, and on YouTube at No Static Radio, as well as Discovered TV, our newest platform on Discovered.tv. That's Discovered with an ED at the end, .tv. Just type in No Static Radio, all one word, same thing, for recent uploads of this show and others on this platform. And for continuous streaming or for free replays of this show and all others on the platform, check us out on Mixer or Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio in the toolbar for replays of this show and others. For continuous streaming, you guys can check us out on TuneIn.com, LiveOnLiveRadio.net, or MediaQ for an uninterrupted listening experience. You don't have to do anything. Just sit back, relax. It'll do its own refreshing, and you can just enjoy all of the shows here on No Static Radio. And for all things No Static Radio, including up and coming events, merchandise, and an in-depth look at all our great show hosts here, please check out our website at www.nostaticradio.net. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in on this beautiful Saturday. And you know what it is? We've got more music for your listening pleasure here on your Voice of the Revolution, nostaticradio.net, powered by Google, partner with Colors, and sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines and Design Me exclusively. You guys be safe. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the weather. And we'll talk to you on Monday. Peace.